Today we're taking a look at some ArchiCAD tips and tricks, and in this session we're going to be looking at detailing in ArchiCAD. Not necessarily the nitty-gritty of how you actually draw a line or a circle or those sort of things, but how we can deal with information from various different sources that we can use as part of the detailing process within ArchiCAD. I'm Ken from CAD Image UK. You may already know that CAD Image is based in Auckland, New Zealand, but we have offices elsewhere in Australia and here in the UK. And as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the not so sunny part of Scotland today. Just checking out the window in case it's changed in the last 4 seconds, because that's what it does here. Let's carry on. What I'm going to do, there's no death by PowerPoint in this session. Everything is based entirely in ArchiCAD, and I've got a number of views to talk through various different topics. So first thing I was going to look at is just show you this fantastic model that I've put together. It's probably described as minimalist architecture, but it's just a very simple section of a building I've put together so we can look at detailing various bits of it and how we can use information from different sources, etc. So we have a perspective view and we have a very interesting roof plan. The stuff we're more interested in, I suppose, is the sections. So there's various bits here that I've pulled out details and highlighted it, bits and pieces that we're going to take a look at. And of course we can do that in various different views, from 3D perspectives, plans, sections, elevations, or a 3D documents here. But what I'm going to do is run through these various different detailing sections to talk about detailing in different types of scenarios. So the very first one I'm going to look at is just a very simple floor-to-floor and floor-to-wall junction. Here we can see I've highlighted an area, and the detail here technically isn't correct. So the first thing I'm looking at in terms of detailing is doing as little work as possible in the 2D environment. I'm going to use the 3D to build that information for me. So if we have a look again in the 3D perspective view, what I can see here is that the floor actually runs underneath the plaster finish, whereas in the reality, when the building has been put together, the plaster walls will probably be done first, and then the floor finish would go down. So this junction here is not what I want it to be. So to fix that, I'm going to use building materials. Building materials come into ArchiCAD 17 to give us priority-based connections, and effectively what I want to do here is fix this connection in this area. What I'll do is I'll go back to my section, and I'm going to select this slab area. With the slab selected, if I go to Options, Element Attributes, and in Building Materials, it's quite a useful thing that this does. With that element selected, if I press this button here to organise the building materials, what it does is show me all the building materials that are part of the current selection. So it tells me here I've got one editable because there's one editable composite. What I'll do though is I'll stick this back to a priority-based system, and what I need to do is just scroll through here to find myself the correct area. If I scroll up rather than down, I can find it. And the issue I've got is that the gypsum floor has an intersection priority of 210, and the timber floor has a 220, and that actually causes the timber to run underneath the plaster. And what I want to do is change that priority. There's two ways we can do it. It's numeric. There's a slider. We can use that to pull it up and down. Or what I could do is just take timber floor and just drag it just above gypsum, and that automatically renumbers and reorganises. And if I hit OK, by magic, that junction now corrects itself, and we're looking at a much better 2D detail. If we look at perspective, again that updates, and we can see the plaster running down until it hits the screed or the insulation, and then the floor finishing on top of that. Next thing I was going to discuss was the use of complex profiles for detailing, which sounds a bit daft really because complex profiles are complex. But what they allow me to do is, in this scenario here, is create this detail where I can see my heavy block work coming down onto the foundation. I've got some heavy block work on the outside face, and then it returns into my face brick or whatever type of brick finish it is up here. If I actually select this element, what we can do is just go and edit the complex profile. All I've done is just create this fairly basic footing or foundation detail. You'll see it doesn't have the mortar joints because they're actually something I'm going to come on and talk about in just a second. But you can see that I could have put in my different types of fill, etc. Now, what I really could do with is changing scale to something like 1 to 20, which is more the sort of area you would see it in. But this is just a complex profile, so I can do various things, like maybe go and add a fresh piece of something that fills the bottom of the cavity here. Let's have, well, just stick some sand in it. So these are just 2D fills, so I literally just go and grab, where's the outside? Should really probably have the water and anything run towards the outside. That's how these things are supposed to work. So I've just stuck some sand in the bottom of the complex profile here. And what this does is, if I choose to apply, close that and save it, it updates, and we can now see that I've filled the bottom of the cavity. Spookily close to that intersection there, although that was just pure luck, I'm afraid. Or I could claim it was skill, but I'd be lying. That is my new detail, and basically by using this, anywhere I cut a section, anywhere if I go back to building materials here and actually scroll down to the bottom, then you can see the new detail as it's created. So what we're trying to do is as little work as possible in 2D by creating as much of this in 3D as possible. So if we go back to the foundation, you can see again it's updated, and all I've done here is coming on to talk about the next piece. If we look at the section, you'll see the top half here, there are no mortar joints on the wall, it's just plain fills. And what I've actually done, if we go and look at the courses that I've added down here, these are just very simple 2D fills that I've placed on top of what's already there to embellish it and just add that extra level of detail. The way I've actually done that is very, very simple. I've added one here already. Let's just take this and we'll drag a copy across to the brickwork. Now the brick's actually 102.5, so we just need to stretch this slightly. What I can do is apply that to this face, and the way I've done it is, literally as I've done here, I've added one of them. I'm going to use multiply, so with it selected, right click, move and multiply. And all I'm going to do is say spread this on an increment of 75 millimeters. 65 mil brick, 10 mil mortar, and off it goes and runs up at 75 centres. So if I just click, and then literally all I do is run it up, try and keep it straight because there's various bodies like walls to be straight and different things. So we take that and we run it up to there, and now I didn't keep it straight, can you believe that? Undo, do that again. That was a deliberate mistake, obviously. So we stay snapped onto 90 degrees, drop that in place, and now we have our various different mortar joints stretching up throughout the outside face. To do the inside face, we just repeat that, but we do 225 increments, and then whatever details necessary at the top here, I'm not quite sure exactly what the detail would be, but that can all be sorted out later on. So effectively that's all I'm doing, is just embellishing over the top of the more detailed 3D section with some basic 2D information. The other way to do things, of course, is just start from scratch and build a detail up manually. So what I've done here is I've given myself little swatches of fill pattern to work with, and what I'm going to maybe do is start with just a very simple brick. So I'm going to draw a rectangle that's going to be 102.5 by 65, and there is brick number 1. I'll then add some mortar on top of that. In fact, let's just keep it like this first. Let's just copy it directly on top of itself, one on top of the other. And then because I've used these swatches, I can Alt-click to pick up, and Alt-Command or Alt-Control to inject. And that converts from brick, obviously, into a piece of mortar. And then we just shrink it down 55 mil, so we're left with a 10 mil band of mortar. What I'll do is just key it in slightly on the back edge here. We'll go to the top and we'll just point that in maybe 5 mil, just because it's nice and easy to do. But the key thing here is I've used only 2 fill patterns so far, so the outlines are part of the fill I don't have to draw any separate lines, any separate arcs or circles for these sort of things. It is just 2 elements so far. And then if I go and say let's multiply, we'll have incrementally another 8 copies, and they will go from here to the top. And that goes, and that builds up effectively my outside skin, my outside face of wall. I'll take the top one, and I'm going to mirror a copy. So I've just used Control Command M and then the modifier to give me the copy. And what I'm going to do is stick the mouse anywhere there and say from there go X50 plus and enter. And what that does is give me a mirror point 50 mil out, so effectively I'm creating a 100 mil cavity. There we go. So that gives me a 102.5 sized brick. But what I want is actually a 140 wide block. So I'm going to take a marquee, stick the mouse there, and go from there X37.5 plus. And what that does now is stretch that end so that this is now, if we go and measure, there to there, 140 mil wide. And then I'll just take the base and we will offset the bottom edge down to here somewhere. That gives me my odd size brick, but again I can just Alt-click, Alt-Command or Alt-Control, and that drops in, and now it's a concrete block. And we can multiply another 2 copies of this one from the top to the bottom. So I now have my inside face. I have gone for really hideous bright colours here just because really, just to show them off, but I'll take a copy of this up. We will rotate from there to there, and we will drag from there to the middle of the block. And then just because I can zoom in here and we can do little things like maybe offset this edge back. We'll create a new point here, we'll take that point, stick it up there, and then we'll stick a little bit of a dab on the outside of it. We'll take this one out completely, and we will mirror a copy about the middle, from there to there. Obviously there's a bit of an issue here, but again I can take the marquee, take this edge and just stretch it back to there, and that pulls back and finishes off, and effectively that gives me my little bit of cavity closer up there. Next thing I'll do though is grab just a plain old white fill, and I want some sort of timber block up on top here, so we're going to make this just 100 by 50 just for ease. And now I'm finally going to draw a couple of lines. So these are just going to be from there across to there, and we drop that into place, and that gives me a timber block. We can take some more fill pattern, and this time we'll just take this and stretch it across here by whatever distance, and let's make it 100 mil tall. So this is going to be some sort of rafter or beam or something like that, and then we'll come around here at an angle of 30 degrees and we'll stretch that and again make that 100. Because these are white fills, one sits on top of the other and it all tidies up and it looks nice. What I'll do is I'll come in here and just give this a vertical edge. Whoops, try again. So that snaps onto there, and then I want a 300 offset from the face of the wall, so just stretch out to the wall itself and do X 300 minus, and that goes and drops in. Because these are fills, they're nice and easy to edit, so I can always come back in here and I can put a little sort of cut detail on the end of that if I want. I could come up to the end here, maybe put in some sort of cut line, whatever we want to do, just to finish off the end of it. But the final thing I'm going to do is stick some insulation in. So I have some objects I've already saved here. These are obviously sized as shown here, which, you know, is fantastic. But the reality is I want to use these, but I don't want preset sizes. So what I'm going to do is set it to a rotated diagonal placement, which means I can come in here and say from there to there, and off we have first piece of insulation, and then the next piece can run from there and stretch down. I've not quite got the depth correct, but we can always go and fix that by just tweaking the size so it fits into place. And we can do the same with the rotated one across the top here. But effectively I'm just using very, very simple 2D elements to put something like this together. You can build things up with bits of line, fills, objects, whatever it is. So talking of objects, I was going to talk about BIM components because that's a great place to go and find objects, funnily enough. And the secret here is you have to set the search up correctly in the first place. So what I'm going to do is just go into the object tool, kind of pull it to somewhere that you can see about there, and there's two areas that I've highlighted. So the first one is the actual search button. So across the top of the object dialog, you've got your folder view, you've got your subtype view, and then you've got search. And in the red text, these are some of the terms that are quite useful to search on. So if I just search for CAD image and spell it properly, because that always helps. The next thing to do is type in the name, that goes in searches, but we can choose here, we can either search only in the active library, so that just searches the loaded libraries, or what we can do is say search only on BIM components, or as it's set just now as both. So just to filter it, let's look at the online ones. So I've set it for CAD image, and off it goes, and then any of our objects that are on here that contain the word CAD image, surprisingly, we can go and find. So you'll see there's things like, there's an engineer's bolt, there's a 3D chain element, there's screws, there's different types of screws. If we scroll down, there's scale markers, there's further bolt-headed screws, various different bits and pieces. And if I want to use these, all I have to do with them is, let's just take this one here. We can check what the licensing is, so it's free, so that's no problem. We literally just hit download and embed. That then does its magic stuff, and now we have this object embedded within the library of this particular project. That can then be extracted out to another library if you want to use it elsewhere, but effectively that's all you actually have to do. And then you've got the object. Depending on the object, there's various settings. They follow a kind of standard CAD image set of protocols, so the interface should be similar. If you're used to our tools already, they shouldn't be too difficult to follow. You can do things like switch a washer on and off, we can set the orientation, and off we go from there. So that's available at any time just to go and search and use. These are some of the useful sort of phrases I've found. So obviously our own, if you search detail, line, dimension, and symbol, there's various different detailing type objects available in there. Some 2D, some 3D, depending on what it is. So it's worth taking a look just to see what you can find. Next thing I was going to look at was detailing elements. We did have a detail elements tool until ArchiCAD 17. It had a number of components that people were familiar with and used to. Unfortunately, that was retired and is no longer available for ArchiCAD 18. However, the data that's in existing projects can be taken out and brought into, for example here, ArchiCAD 18 if you want to use it. So we have various different types of screw heads that I've chosen. There's joist hangers, there's screws with flat head, round heads, countersunk, whatever it happens to be, different bolt symbols. These are just a selection that I've grabbed and picked up to use. But you'll see if I try and edit them, then what I'm actually looking at is a PDF file. So the settings for this tell me somewhere in here, it's in a PDF called Detail Elements PDF. So I can't really do much with it unless you use one of the big new features that's talked about in ArchiCAD 18, which is the ability to explode PDFs to turn elements into, turn PDF into workable elements. So literally all I do is select the PDF, right-click the mouse, and pick Explode into Current View. This then pops up a dialog confirming I've got one selected and editable PDF that's about to be exploded. I've got the option here to keep original elements after exploding, so that's just going to keep the PDF, but I don't want it. We've then got options here of what we do with layers, whether we use the drawings layers, so the project we're in right now, or whether we import the embedded layers. So because I'm coming from one of my own ArchiCAD projects to another one of my ArchiCAD projects, it's not such a big deal. If you're working with other consultants, clients, and data, then importing the embedded layers can be a bit of a nightmare if they're messy, but it's something to keep an eye on. Line types, you've got the options. We can use the project attributes, substitute or import them all, and for fill types we can use, again, project attributes or generate symbol or image fills. Fills are a bit of a tricky one because PDFs don't handle fills in a particularly good way. and quite often what you actually find is something that looks nice and linear and simple, it should be a fill, doesn't actually work particularly well, so we have to be a bit careful with that. It's a bit of testing the PDF and see what it is. It all depends where the PDF came from. We'll then get further override options that we can choose, uniform pens or fonts, etc. But I'm quite happy just to take it as it is, hit the old OK button, and then magic happens. And I'm looking at similar sort of thing, but if I try and select, what I get now is one line. They are all actually grouped. If I switch grouping on, you'll see the whole thing selects. But now what I have is usable 2D data. So if, for example, I want to use this round-headed screw, it's made up of millions and millions of bits of lines and things. There's a number of things I can do with it. I'd probably first of all do a reshape and do a line work consolidation, and that just goes and tidies up where possible. Sadly, these lines are all separate, so it doesn't actually make that much of a difference, but it's worth trying. The other thing it might be worth checking here is to reshape and unify, and that has made a big difference. I've gone from 1,086 elements to 34. Trust me to pick the worst possible example of object to work with, because there's multiple elements, it becomes a bit tricky to actually work with. So you could group it and you could use it that way, or what you could do is with it selected like this, we could just go and say File, Libraries and Objects, save the selection as a new object. We'll put it in an embedded library. I've already got detail elements in there. Give it a detail name so you know what it is. Make sure it's in detail elements. Save that. We'll then get the option. We can actually set various different bits. Background, pen as foreground actually. Give it a various bits. Hit OK. And then when I go to the object tool, there is my rounded screw head thingy, and it has fills that we can set. It has pens, so we could give that as a background pen of some sort. Pink for there, and a blue outline. So we can make something truly hideous, which we can use again and again and again and again. And this is now just a 2D object available for me to use wherever we need to use it. If we move on now, and the final bit to look at is just how we can use external data. Here I have a section or detail of the section similar to the one we looked at earlier on, but this has not yet been corrected. What we can do is, rather than reinvent the wheel, if this has already been created by somebody else, what we can do is simply come across here, and here is a detail that's already been created that I can use by simply embedding the PDF file and then working with it. You'll see here this is actually done by WM Design. They were kind enough to allow me to borrow some of their details from an upcoming project to be able to use and show off here. So this literally is a PDF file that's been embedded, and to do that, all we do is if we come down here, here are some further PDFs that have been done. So that was a floor-to-floor detail. Let's just take an eaves detail. Literally PDF, ArchiCAD, doesn't matter if it's Mac or PC, drag it inside, let go of the button, and now we have a PDF embedded in ArchiCAD. That is actually linked, so if I want to go and edit it, or the PDF's updated, once that's updated, this file itself will actually update, and you'll see if I select it, on the right click, there is an update option available there. The next option, spookily enough, is the same one we've just looked at. So here's a detail that's created from my model. Here's a detail from an external source. Again, this can be exploded. And we go through the same options as before. And what it does, you see we're left with various bits of text. But I can then come in and pick up whatever elements that I need to, such as that area there, and maybe just drag a copy across and embed it. I'm just doing this very, very roughly. Very badly actually, but we can then copy bits of it and bring it in and use it as part of a detail that way. So let's take that back out. That's something you got to do properly. Another way to do things is to use a hotlinked module. Details may be similar across multiple projects, so rather than copy paste them in or modify lots and lots of different variations of them, what I've got here is what looks to be a drawing, but if I select it, you'll see actually if I leave the mouse to rest there, it tells me it's part of a Hotlinked module, HLM Hotlinked module. It tells me name of the file. I happen to have a file selected, various bits and pieces, but what you can see is, all the elements are selectable. We can dimension to them, we can pick up attributes. I can't modify them in any way because they exist as part of this separate file. So if I wanted to edit it, what I could do is go and find the Hotlinked module. It is actually in this folder that I had opened just previously. You see it's a tiny file, it's 318K, and all that is in it, there's no views, there's no layer combinations, there's only minimal attributes. All that's in it is this detail here. Another way to edit it is if I make sure grouping is active, as it is now. When the whole thing selects, you'll see I've got little square corners. When I right click, I have the option here to go and edit this module in a separate ArchiCAD. And what that would do is go and launch another ArchiCAD and take me into that separate file that only contains this 2D information that can then be placed in multiple projects. If we look at the Hotlinked Manager, it tells me where it is, and status is actually missing, so let's just relink it to this file here, and then it'll be able to give me the proper status updates. So if we hit OK, that reloads and updates for me. The next thing I was going to look at was just simply linking an external document. So again, here what I have is a whole bunch of details. These are actually part of a DWG file. So again, if I select, we can go into the settings. It tells me down here it's part of a DWG. I have options down here to go and switch layers on and off within that DWG to control the visibility of elements. But the other thing about DWGs is if I want to look at just these two details here, what I can do is, because it's linked in this way, is just grab this and then just shrink the view to the part that I actually want to use. And if I actually want to reorder them, what I can do is drag a copy of the whole view. So we'll take that one across, so we're looking at the right hand one, and we'll take that edge across, so we're looking at the left hand one. And maybe I want to stack them, so we do this sort of thing, whatever we need to do, but it just goes and brings it in and does the various different bits and pieces that I need to make the whole thing work. Dwg linking is done just using the drawing tool. So in the toolbox, we have the drawing tool, we click a placement point, and then we go choose, there is my DWG, hit open, and what it does is load in, we're in millimeters. It's probably going to land on top of these ones, close, but it just goes and links to that DWG file. So it is linked. If the DWG changes or updates, then this view is updated. The beauty of this, and with PDFs and any of these other techniques and methods, is these elements are externally linked, so they actually only exist on one physical layer. There's not lots and lots of layers embedded into the project. So it's quite a useful way of bringing in the information to work on it. So that's the final part of the presentation. Just like to say a thank you for attending. Hopefully you've found some useful bits and pieces in here.